Yes, yes.
Okay, great. Very good. So in the morning, we have been talking about a hierarchy of models. Okay, simple models, intermediate models, and complex models. And today we talked about the simple models. Okay, uh, among the simple models, generally we consider the EBM, that is the energy balance model, the SCM, that is the single column model, and the RCM, the radiative convective model. Okay, and as we discussed in the morning, the EBM is a very idealized model. Okay, it considers the Earth as a small point in the space. Okay, there is no variation in the latitude, longitude, and the altitude. So we just try to estimate the surface temperature of the Earth based upon the energy balance consideration. That means whatever is what is incoming energy, what is outgoing energy, we try to just balance them. Okay, and such models are basically used for conceptualization purpose, right, or understanding of the subject or idealized atmosphere, Earth atmospheric system. Then slightly more realistic than the EM is the so-called SCM, the single column model. Well, the single column model is actually very, very important and very popular also because it is simple. It is just a one column of the atmosphere, as we discussed in the morning. We consider just one column of the atmosphere or a grid box of the model. Okay, and in that one column of the atmosphere, we try to parameterize different physical processes. Rather, we try to test a given physical process while keeping rest of the physical processes constant, or by prescribing the impact of the other physical processes in that column of the atmosphere. We just test a new scheme. If you have developed a new scheme, we just try to test our new scheme by fixing all other schemes or prescribing the impact of all other schemes in that column of the atmosphere. Okay, we also prescribe the advective forcings. The advective forcing, that means the forcings which come from the neighboring grid boxes. Okay, because the atmosphere is continuous. So a column of the atmosphere cannot be isolated, cannot be considered in isolation, right? And so we have to prescribe what will happen, say, after the next time step. Suppose if you are taking a time step of 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or even in a single column model, we can have a longer time steps also. Say, for example, 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour. So what will happen after 3 hours in that column of the atmosphere, that we don't know because it is single column and anything can come from the neighboring points, right? So those fluxes which are advected from the neighboring points are prescribed in that column. Okay, and also all other physical processes, the impact of all other physical processes except the one which we are trying to test are prescribed. So the beauty of this single column is that you're isolating a new scheme that you might have developed and testing it without contaminating it from the rest of the model processes. Because when you're testing a new scheme, you'd like to see the impact of your scheme or the new scheme that you have developed and not getting contaminated or diluted by the other physical processes, which might be also not perfectly parameterized in the model. And so we try to just isolate all other schemes. We try to fix or prescribe their impact or flux rate and just vary the one which we are trying to test. Like in convection, we just try to vary the convection scheme that we have developed, if we have developed, and try to see what is the impact of convection in the temperature change or moisture change in that column of the atmosphere. Okay. In other words, we just try to calculate the time tendencies. Okay, time tendencies of the basic parameters like temperature, humidity, or even the precipitation. Okay. Precipitation is the most important product, the last product of any model, which now everybody is interested in. What will be the precipitation? What will be the rainfall? Say, for example, after 1 hour, 3 hours, 6 hours, 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, right? So the last product is the precipitation or rainfall. And also, similarly, we also will be interested in what will be the temperature, say after 3 hours, 6 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours. What will be the moisture content of the atmosphere? Similarly, okay, the variation of these parameters by convection alone, if we are developing a new scheme for the convection. Okay. Similarly, if you are testing a new scheme for cloud microphysics, then same thing we do for that also. That means we try to test the impact of new cloud scheme in the precipitation or evolution of the temperature or evolution of the moisture with time. Okay, isolating all other physical processes. Okay, so this is the concept behind the single column model. And why it is important or why it is popular? Because many people try to say that, okay, this scheme is not good, that scheme is not giving good results to my situation, to my problem. And therefore, they try to remove the weaknesses of the existing schemes and then try to introduce their own concept and develop a new scheme and then try to test it. So if we test the scheme in a full-fledged three-dimensional model, first of all, that becomes very expensive, as I said in the morning, because it takes a lot of time to run a GCM, right? And secondly, it takes a lot of time both computationally as well as clock time. Okay, sometimes in the very big centers like NCAR, you might have heard about the NCAR National Center for Atmospheric Research in USA, or ECMWF, the European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasting, etc. Big centers, NASA, for example. Hundreds of jobs running parallelly in the computer. Big jobs. And many of them are climate simulations for several years. So the computer is fully occupied, right? And if you want to test your small scheme, which just may take just a few seconds in a big computer, a new scheme may take just a few seconds to test a single column model, especially, for example, SCM. But that few seconds or few minutes of testing, for that you will have to wait for a long time because your job will be put in the queue. Your other jobs will be running and computer will be fully occupied, right? So you try to test in a simplified version so that you get your results quickly. Okay, so it's very popular. But once you have tested your scheme in a single column, both semi-prognostically as well as fully prognostically, and you know the meaning, the difference between them, because I explained that in the morning today. The difference between semi-prognostic testing and fully prognostic testing. Once you have done that, then in any case, we have to again plug in the new scheme into the full-fledged three-dimensional model, because that is what we eventually run for real-time numerical weather prediction. For real-time NWP or for climate simulation or climate prediction, eventually we have to run a full-fledged three-dimensional model, not only atmospheric model, but also the coupled model. Okay, couple atmosphere ocean model. So eventually your single column model results have to also work properly in the full-fledged atmospheric GCM or coupled atmospheric GCM. So eventually that has to be done also. But we have to go step by step. Okay. So that is the advantage of the single column model. Okay. Now slightly more complex than the single column model is the so-called RCM. Well, RCM stands for both. RCM can stand for regional climate model or radiative convective model. Okay, it can stand for both. Same acronym for both. RCM stands for regional climate model as well as radiative convective model. Now, in the radiative convective model, regional climate model is again a different thing. That is also a three-dimensional model, but only covers a part of the Earth, a small region. Like the domain will cover just India, for example, India and neighborhood in the RCM. Okay, but it is complex because it has all other things as in the GCM, right? But in the RCM, the beauty is that we just try to test the, say for example, new convection parameterization schemes, or test the impact of the greenhouse gases, okay, or we test a new radiation scheme, okay, like that. So these RCMs are generally used for testing new radiation scheme or new convection scheme or new cloud parameterization scheme, etc. And these RCMs can be both one-dimensional, two-dimensional, or even three-dimensional. But three-dimensional RCM becomes a GCM again. Okay. So unlike in the single column model, which is just one column of the atmosphere, the RCM can be both single column or one-dimensional or two-dimensional. And when we say three-dimensional, that means it is a full-fledged global circulation model or global climate model. Okay. So that is the difference between EBM, the energy balance model, the single column model, and the radiative convective model. So we are going to elaborate more about the RCM now, the radiative convective model. Okay. So is my slide clearly visible to all of you?
Yes, sir.
No? Okay, good. So what is radiative convective model? Okay, we'll try to explain it in different ways. Okay. Basically, a model which has no horizontal degrees of freedom and so represents vertical energy transfers only. Okay. That is the basic fundamental philosophy of the radiative convective model. Okay. It is purely a thermodynamic model. It cannot model the momentum in any reasonable way without a horizontal coordinate, because it is just considering the balance between the radiation and convection, okay, in a column of the atmosphere. So it cannot predict the momentum, or it cannot model the momentum. And so the momentum fluxes have to be somehow again prescribed. Okay. Now this is an illustration of a one-dimensional radiative convective model. Okay. Now as you can see in this diagram, as you can see in the diagram, this is a single column. Okay. Let us assume that this is a column of the atmosphere, and it has several layers. It is divided into several layers. Typically, it can have 50 layers or more, depending upon, again, how much powerful your computer is. Okay, it can have several layers within. Okay, so we have the incoming short wave radiation from the top of the atmosphere in this column. Okay, and in each layer, layer by layer, we try to compute the flux rate, how much flux is going down and how much flux is coming up. Okay, layer by layer. And similarly, at the surface, the radiation absorbed, the amount of radiation that is absorbed at the surface, we try to consider. And also, we try to prescribe the global average albedo and heat capacity at the surface. Okay, so this is the backward long wave radiation into the atmosphere. Okay, so there are downward fluxes of short wave and upward fluxes of the long wave. And in each layer, again, we try to compute the new fluxes based upon the balance between radiation and convection. Okay. Also, each layer can have gases, greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, okay, the water vapor, the aerosols, etc., can be present in each layer of the atmosphere. So these kind of models are also good for testing the effect of greenhouse gases in a simple way. Okay. Actually, this kind of models were very popular almost like 25, 30 years ago, very popular. And one of the pioneer of this kind of model, radiative convective model, is an Indian scientist. I don't know whether you have heard his name. His name is V. Ramanathan, Professor V. Ramanathan. Have you heard the name of Professor V. Ramanathan? Yes or no? Am I audible to all of you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So, Professor V. Ramanathan used to work at NCAR in USA, National Center for Atmospheric Research. And that's where he conceptualized this radiative convective model, okay, to estimate the impacts of different greenhouse gases, also to parameterize the effects of convection in a simple way. Okay. But B. Ramanathan, after that, many other people also worked in this area. And after his tenure at NCAR, I think he moved to probably California, that some Oceanographic Institute in California. Okay, and just for information. So, in one-dimensional radiative convective models, the atmosphere is divided into several layers, say about 50 layers in the vertical. Each layers can either represent the global average conditions at that altitude or the average conditions over some particular locations on the Earth at a particular time. The radiative convective models are key to more complex models, because this is the simplest form of the more complex models. Okay. These models are generally one-dimensional or two-dimensional, with height always present as a dimension. If it is a two-dimensional, then one-dimensional is always a height. Okay, and the second dimension is the latitude. Generally, we don't consider longitude as the second dimension. We consider the latitude because there is a latitudinal variation, a lot of latitudinal variation of the temperature, right? Because you know that pole is so cold, equator is so warm, hot. So there is a contrast, heat contrast between equator and the pole, and it makes a lot of difference, right? It makes a lot of impact in the atmospheric motion, formation of the Hadley cell, for example. You know about the Hadley cell, right? Yes or no? Have you heard about the Hadley cell?
Yes,
Yes, sir.
sir.
We have
Yes,
studied
sir.
Yes.
Hadley
Hadley
cell,
cell.
solar cell.
Right. So Hadley cell is basically the result of the excess heating at the equator and cooling at the pole. Okay. So when we consider when we have a two-dimensional radiative convective model, then one of the dimension is, of course, always the vertical layer, and the second dimension is the latitudinal variation from equator to pole, for example, right? So the RCM, the radiative convective model, they model radiative transformations as energy is absorbed, emitted, and scattered. Okay. They model the radiative transformations. So many schemes now of radiations developed by many people. They first tested it in the RCM, the radiative convective model. The role of convection and vertical energy transfer through atmospheric motion. Okay, that is also another thing which is investigated or modeled by the RCM. Okay, by considering surface albedo, cloud amount, and atmospheric turbidity, it calculates the heat absorption in various atmospheric layers. Okay, so what is prescribed is the surface albedo. What is prescribed here is the cloud amount. So amount of cloud is prescribed, unless you are trying to test the cloud scheme itself. Otherwise, it is prescribed. Okay, and what is prescribed is generally the climatological value. Suppose if your column is in the mid latitude, then we also have the information of the climatology for that location. Check what is the average cloud amount that we know already from the climatology. So we prescribe those things. And atmospheric turbidity, right? You know what the turbidity. So by prescribing these things, surface albedo, cloud amount, turbidity, etc., it calculates the heat absorption in various atmospheric layers, right? So if the heating in a layer exceeds a certain value, the lapse rate changes, and therefore it will convect into the layer above, transferring the heat energy. You know the lapse rate, right? The rate of change of temperature with height. And you know what is the typical lapse rate of the environment. You also know what is the typical dry adiabatic lapse rate. You also know what is the moist adiabatic lapse rate, right? But the moist adiabatic lapse rate and the dry adiabatic lapse rate are fixed, that you know. Okay. Can somebody say what is the dry adiabatic lapse rate? How much is the dry adiabatic lapse rate?
9.8 Kelvin per kilometer.
9.8, yes. What 9.8? That means about approximately 10 degrees centigrade per kilometer, right? The environmental lapse rate generally is less than that. But in certain situations, in certain conditions, the environmental lapse rate can become very, very steep. It can become super adiabatic. That means if the ground is heated very much because of the radiation, say for example in Rajasthan, you know what is the surface temperature sometimes now in some of the locations in Rajasthan, what is the maximum temperature it reaches? Have you any idea?
45 degrees. 45 to
Okay. Well, 45 degrees तो दिल्ली में भी होता है कई बार. More than 45. Generally 45 is fine. Like in our university location, it is not more than 45 generally. But I am talking about Rajasthan. Now, other locations where the highest temperature is recorded in the country. You know about that? What is the highest temperature recorded in the country on the surface of the ground? Any idea? No idea. It seems everybody is silent. That means you have no idea about that. Well, the highest temperature at the ground in our country is recorded to be about 51, 52 degrees centigrade. Maximum temperature in a day. Just imagine. Place like Churu in Rajasthan, or Sri Ganganagar in Rajasthan. They are very hot places. It gets heated very much in the daytime, and as soon as the evening comes, the temperature simply falls down. Okay, because of the desert type of atmosphere, there is a large variation between the temperature of the day and night. So just imagine maximum temperature in the day going up to 51 degree or 52 degrees centigrade. What is the temperature? Say, for example, maximum temperature in Kerala nowadays. Have any idea? Anybody? What is the maximum temperature in Kerala nowadays?
sir, 30,
Yeah, approximately.
32, 34, sir.
Exactly, approximately like that. And depends on the location, of course. With a coastal area, then it is less hot. maximum temperature doesn't rise much. But if it's the interior location, then temperature can be high. But as you said, say 32, 33 degrees centigrade. Just imagine in Rajasthan at Churu, Srinagar, temperature rising up to 51, 52. Probably you can cook chapati also. You can cook breads at that temperature. Just put the bread on the sand and you will get your chapati ready. So hot, right? So in such situation, when the ground is intensely heated, then lapse rate becomes very, very steep. Okay, super adiabatic. In other words, of course, the temperature at the ground is very high, but as soon as you go up in the atmosphere, the temperature will reduce very sharply, change very sharply. And so the lapse rate is very high. Okay. And when the lapse rate is very, very intense or steep, then immediately the convection starts, convective currents develop. You know that, like you're heating the water in a kettle, electric kettle, and you see the convection starting. How? Because the lowest layer of the water in contact with this kettle gets heated first, and immediately the convection starts, convective current. And similarly, when the lowest layer of the atmosphere in contact with the ground is heated intensely, the convection starts, and that convection actually restores the original lapse rate. Okay, that convection which starts, that will restore or readjust the temperature, right? And so in nature, in real atmosphere, the super adiabatic lapse rate, say 11 degrees centigrade, 12 degrees centigrade per kilometer, cannot last long. It cannot exist for a long time. Okay, because of the intense convection which will immediately develop and restore back to the normal lapse rate. Okay, and also the heat will be convected or advected from the neighboring points. Okay, so those things are all considered in a model, and especially in a RCM, radiative convective model. So the RCMs are also used sometimes to model the tropical Hadley cells. Okay, also used to model the tropical Hadley cells, and they are the examples of this type of model. Okay, and for that we have to have a two-dimensional model, at least two-dimensional RCM. That means one dimension is your vertical, and another dimension is your horizontal in a north-south direction. Okay. Now, in a two-dimensional model, as I said, you have got one is the vertical dimension, as you can see in this figure. One is the vertical dimension, and other is the horizontal, say from equator to the pole. Okay. So this is the pole, polar latitude, and this is the equator. Okay. So we know or we prescribe the albedo on the surface at all these locations. Okay, because that surface albedo will vary from place to place depending upon the type of the surface, right? Say for example, if the surface is covered by water, lake or ocean, its albedo will be different. If it is covered by sand, its albedo will be different. If it is covered by snow, the albedo will be different, right? So at different locations from equator to the pole, the albedos are different, but we know its value. Climatologically, what is the value of albedo that we know at all latitudes, right? So we prescribe those things. The albedo at the surface at poles and albedo at the surface at the equator. Okay, and we have got the direct solar radiation, incoming solar radiation. Okay, so As you know, this part of the earth is heated very much because of the solar radiation, while the polar latitudes are cool relative to the tropical latitude. And therefore, there is a strong temperature gradient between equator to the pole. Strong temperature gradient from equator to pole. This part of the atmosphere is cool, and this part of the atmosphere is hot, or dry. And therefore, the heat is transported from this part to that part, advected. Okay, advected. Initially, actually, what happens is that when the surface is heated, as you know, the air will rise vertically up. Air will rise vertically up and starts diverging in both directions, towards north as well as towards south, which is not shown in this diagram, not visible in the diagram. The rising air from the equator will diverge at a certain height, both towards pole in the northern hemisphere, toward North Pole, as well as toward the South Pole. Okay, and as it rises up and starts blowing toward the pole, then it gets the effect of the Earth's rotation. Okay, because it's a large scale motion, and so the Earth rotation force, that is the Coriolis force, again comes into action. Okay, and also as it goes to this side, then it cools, and as it cools, then it starts sinking. So we have got a cellular structure of the motion, and that is the Hadley cell, Hadley circulation. I mean, all these things are, of course, now subject of the general circulation of the atmosphere, which I hope that you have studied somewhere earlier. Okay, so this is a schematic representation.
Sir? No, sir.
Hello, sir. Sir, I couldn't hear you.
Hello, sir.
Hello, am I audible and
Yes,
visible to you?
Yes, sir.
yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Sorry, I got disconnected in between because of the internet fluctuation. So now I'm back. So what we were discussing is the two-dimensional radiative convective model, right?
Presentation is off.
Yeah.
Presentation is off.
Oh, I see. My screen visible to you?
No, sir.
Oh, I see. I have to share the screen again, it seems. Okay, share the screen again. So is the screen visible now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, good, good. So in a two-dimensional model, or a
Sir.
two-dimensional model is formed by putting several radiative convective models together. One can create a two-dimensional model for prediction of climate conditions as a function of latitude and height. The transport of heat from the equator to the pole is an important variable in the two-dimensional climate models. Okay, transport of heat from equator to the pole. If a one-dimensional model has 40 vertical layers, its 2D model counterpart with 20 latitude bands, 9 degrees each, from south pole to the north pole will have 800 grid points. See, the number of grid points will multiply obviously when we are increasing the dimension. Right? Now this diagram illustrates a three-dimensional atmosphere ocean general circulation model. Okay, and what we see here, say for example, in this diagram, a typical grid box of the three-dimensional atmospheric GCM. This is the Earth, okay, and the whole Earth is divided into several grid boxes, horizontally and also vertically. So what you are just seeing here is a projection of a single grid box of the three-dimensional model. In this single grid box, you can have anything. You can have part of the box covered by ocean, part of the box covered by the land, part of the box covered by the mountains, and so on. Right? You can also have several vertical layers. Right? These are the vertical layers of the atmosphere in that grid box. And you have got the incoming solar radiation, you have got backward radiation, outgoing long wave radiation. Okay, and each grid box, layer by layer, in different layers of the atmosphere, you can have different types of greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, aerosols, water vapor. You can also have clouds at different layers in the atmosphere because it is a three-dimensional atmospheric ocean general circulation model. So a 3D general circulation model has many more grid points boxes because it looks at latitude, longitude, and altitude variation. If you wanted 10-degree longitude resolution and created a 3D model from the previous 2D model, there would be 800 into 36, that is about 28,600 boxes. I mean, this is simplest, very small. Sometimes, several thousands or sometimes even millions of points, depending on the resolution of the model, millions of boxes. So modern day atmospheric GCM are also coupled to ocean circulation models, biosphere models, and subsurface hydrology models, making them very, very complex. Full climate system models also have many vertical layers in the ocean and up to 10 layers under the ground for soils. Okay, under the ground also we can have several layers in the soil. Okay. So, what are the fundamentals of the RCM? The RCM actually has basically two main equations. One is for the temperature and another is for the moisture, specific humidity. The first model, such model was described by Yanai et al. 1973. Yanai was a professor of atmospheric science, a Japanese scientist at the University of California, Los Angeles. And he published this paper in 1973 in the Journal of Atmospheric Sciences. Okay, very nice paper. If you get a chance, you should read this paper. In a very simple way, here, try to construct a two-dimensional model of the radiative convective atmosphere. Now it starts from the primitive equations for dry static energy. You know what dry static energy? That is the CPT plus GZ. Okay, denoted by S, and the specific humidity Q. Average over a grid cell and make some standard assumptions and obtain the equations for the grid average variables. This is the basis or fundamentals of the Yanai's scheme, Yanai's model. And these are the equations. Like you have got the equation for the temperature in terms of the dry static energy. S is the dry static energy, which is CPT plus GZ. So local variation of the dry static energy, okay, rate of change of dry static energy plus the horizontal advection of the dry static energy plus the vertical advection of the dry static energy is balanced by the two main terms called QC plus QR. Okay, QC plus QR, where QC and Q are the fluxes due to the condensation, evaporation, radiation, etc. Okay, so this is for the dry static energy or for the temperature, because dry static energy is related to temperature. And the second equation is for the moisture or specific humidity. Okay, so in a similar fashion, this is written as dq by dt, rate of change of specific humidity with time plus the horizontal advection of the specific humidity plus the vertical advection of the specific humidity is equal to the flux of the specific humidity. Okay, the very interesting studies. I am running out of time. It's only 15:24, and if I have a class at 3:30, then I should have stopped now. I could tell you a lot of stories about this, these equations about the apparent heat source and the apparent moisture sink, etc. Have you heard about those terminology? Apparent heat source and moisture sink? Yes or no? No?
No,
No, sir.
Well, I could explain if you had no other class at 3:30, but you have a class of the madam. Shall I talk to madam to leave the class for today? If you want to continue, I can talk to her.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. Now let me talk to madam, and I'll tell her that I'm continuing this class. Okay,
Yes.
just a while. Just a minute. So, okay. So can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just talked to madam. Yeah, I just talked to madam. I informed that I'm continuing this class after 3:30, and probably she will take the class at 4:30 in that case. Okay, so be ready for that also. All right. So what I was saying is, we're discussing about the Yanai's equation. Okay, and initially when Yanai developed this equation, even actually these things were developed even before Yanai 1973. You might have heard about the, I don't know whether you are studying the tropical meteorology nowadays, right? Tropical meteorology? Yes or no? Have you heard about the apparent heat source, apparent moisture sink. Have you ever heard about that? Generally denoted by Q1. This is denoted by Q2. You might not have heard about that. Well, long ago, around 1958, the two tropical meteorologists, two tropical scientists called Riehl and Malkus. Okay, Riehl and Malkus in 1958. They were trying to estimate or predict the temperature and a specific humidity of the atmosphere with time. Okay, and so they thought that if they can write the balance equation like the one which you have just seen, del S by del T plus U dot del S horizontal advection plus vertical advection del S divided by del Z. Then if they try to compute each of these terms, and because S is equal to CPT plus GZ, and of course on the right hand side at that time, way back in 1958, they thought that radiation is the only source of heat or QR. Then this left hand side will be balanced by the right hand side. So if they have the observation or measurement of the radiative flux rate, and also they have the measurements of the temperature at different grid points in horizontal as well as in the vertical, then they should be able to predict the future value of the S or in turn the temperature. Okay. And so accordingly they tried to calculate it. But when they did the calculation, then they found that there was a large imbalance. There was a large imbalance in the calculation. I think something went wrong. So the temperature predicted by this equation was not matching with the observation. And so they were just wondering, they started thinking that what went wrong, what are we missing? We are missing something, they thought like that. Okay. And similarly, in the other equation also, the one which you have seen earlier, like this one, the second equation, del Q by del T plus U dot del Q, omega del Q by del Q is equal to del Q, QQ. They tried to predict the specific humidity Q, but they found that there was a large imbalance, there was a mismatch between the prediction and the observation. So then they started thinking what went wrong, what are we missing? And then they speculated that there must be something in the atmosphere, some kind of a heat source of heat. Now, in addition to the radiation, which is causing this imbalance. And after a lot of investigation, thoughts, etc., they realized that it is the clouds, the presence of the clouds, which is causing this imbalance. And if they are not considering the impact of the clouds, that means the condensation. When the clouds form, there is a condensation of water vapor that you already know, right? So the condensation and also the evaporation, when the atmosphere is dry, the water vapor is evaporated. So the condensation and evaporation, because of the clouds, they were not considering at that time. And through lots of investigation, they felt that we are missing the clouds, which act as a source of heat. And so they call that as apparent heat source. The clouds were called as apparent heat source. And similarly, the second equation, when the imbalance occurred, then we realized that clouds also act as a sink of moisture. Clouds act as a sink of moisture because when the clouds develop and rainfall occurs, then the atmosphere loses the moisture. The moisture is drained out of the atmosphere, right? And so the clouds actually act as a apparent heat source and moisture sink. Okay. So this is what originated from these two equations way back in 1958 and conceptualized or pioneered or found by Rayleigh and Malkos. Okay. So now in this equation, as you can see, the QC is added here. This QC is added here because this QC represent the effects of the condensation and evaporation. So this QC is basically the convective heating and is given by LV times C minus E, where LV is the latent heat of vaporization, C is the condensation, and E is the evaporation. This is the net moisture, condensation minus evaporation, plus the turbulent transport of the heat vertically, del by del P of omega prime S prime. So this is the vertical turbulent transport of the moisture or heat. Okay, so this is what is QC. And similarly, the moisture sink QQ is evaporation minus condensation. See the reverse of the sign, reversal of the sign. This is C minus E, but this is E minus C. Okay, this is reversal of the sign. So when evaporation is more, the atmosphere gets more moisture. Okay, but then evaporation, because of the evaporation, cooling takes place, right? When there is a condensation, heat is generated, latent heat of condensation is generated. Whereas when the evaporation takes place, the latent heat is absorbed, and so it leads to cooling. So in this case, it is C minus E, whereas in this case, it is E minus C. The evaporation acts as a source for the moisture, but it acts as a sink for the heat. When evaporation occurs, cooling occurs. So it is a sink for the heat, but source for the moisture. Plus the vertical transport of the moisture, the turbulent vertical transport of the moisture. Okay. And this can be further simplified as LVP plus H, where P is the precipitation. Okay. LV is the latent heat of vaporization, and H is the heat flux. And similarly, this is simplified as E minus P, evaporation minus precipitation. Okay. So these are the fundamental equations used in the RCM, the radiative convective model. The underlying assumptions here are that horizontal transfers of energy at the subgrid scale, you know what is subgrid scale, are negligible compared to those in the vertical. Okay, there are more strong vertical transport of energy than compared to the horizontal transport at the subgrid scale in the vertical. That is, you can say it is a plain parallel assumption for convective and turbulent fluxes, as well as for the radiative, that is QR, rate of change of radiative fluxes with height or pressure. Okay. Now we will need to parameterize the terms on the right hand side of that last equation. That is, you need to compute the QC, QR, QQ in terms of the mean quantities like temperature, specific humidity, as in the GCMs. So not at all obvious that this can be done. So what is the difference between RCM and the single column model? Now, by now you already know the basic concept, the fundamentals. But once again, for recalling or refreshing, an RCM solves the equations for S, that is the dry static energy, which is equivalently temperature, or the theta, that is the potential temperature, and Q, the specific humidity. Okay, that's what the RCM does. And these are the equations. Just now you saw the equations. Okay, when you just write all the other terms on the right hand side and just keep only the tendency term on the left hand side, like del S by del T is equal to all this, and del Q by del T is equal to all this. Okay, keep only the time tendency term on the left hand side because you want to integrate it to find out what is the future value of S or Q. Okay, so the RCM solves these equations to find out what is the T or theta and Q, the specific humidity. For a single horizontal location representing an area from a GCM grid box to an entire planet, the physics terms QS are parameterized. Parameterization is required because in such models the grid is very coarse. Okay. The advection terms containing U and omega cannot be computed internally as the velocities depend on the momentum, including pressure gradient, etc. Okay, so this has to be prescribed. The derivative terms have to be prescribed in the RCM. So what do we do about the advection terms? We have got three choices. Okay, we have got three choices for the advection terms. One is assume that they are zero. That means you are not advecting anything into your column atmosphere. It's just making your atmospheric column isolating your atmospheric column, not allowing anything to get advected from outside into that column. And whatever is that is only the vertical balance between incoming and outgoing. Then the steady state is radiative convective equilibrium. That is QC is equal to QR. Okay, whatever is the radiative heating is balanced by the convective thing. Convective heating is balanced by the radiative heating. And that's why also it can be called a radiative convective model. Or E is equal to P, that is evaporation is equal to precipitation. Right? Evaporation means atmosphere is getting moisture, right? Due to the evaporation, and is losing moisture because of the precipitation, right? So when the two balances, E is equal to P, and that is the radiative convective equilibrium, right? When we say what is radiative convective equilibrium, that means QC is equal to QR. The convective flux is balancing the radiative flux, and the evaporation is balancing the precipitation. That is the radiative convective equilibrium. Okay. Second option about the advection terms is to prescribe them from observations or some other way. Okay. If you have observation, you prescribe them, or otherwise you can also prescribe them through the large scale model outputs. And the third option, of course, is to parameterize them somehow. There is another option, right? So there are three options to deal with the advective terms in a RCM, in a radiative convective model. Now, what are the applications of RCM? The application number one is we can compute the global mean climate of the Earth. Malabe and colleagues who did it in the 1960s. Malabe is another famous scientist. Okay, he worked at GFDL. Have you heard about the GFDL? Have you heard about the GFDL? No?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. What is GFDL? What is GFDL?
Sir, GMT.
G
Hello.
GFDL. GFDL. Have you heard about this? Yes or no?
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay.
No, sir.
Well, this is acronym for Geophysical Fluid Dynamics Laboratory. Geophysical Fluid Dynamics Laboratory. Okay, this is a famous laboratory at Princeton. You know Princeton in USA. Princeton is the name of the place, right? At Princeton University in USA, there is a GFDL, oldest laboratory, you can say, doing research or working on this field, geophysical fluid dynamics. And there are many prominent scientists who developed several theories about the atmosphere, the modeling processes, okay, at GFDL long back in early 60s, almost like 40 plus 20, 50, 60 years ago, GFDL. Okay. So Manabe, when I said Manabe, basically Manabe was a scientist at GFDL. Okay, and his colleagues did applied this RCM for determining the global mean climate. Okay. The other, I mean, in this kind of application, the advection terms are set to 0 as appropriate for the global average. Okay. The counterpart to energy balance models, which include meridional transport, but whose vertical energy transfers are highly simplified. So in RCM, vertical is taken more seriously, and horizontal is not dealt with so seriously. It is dealt with, of course, only in north-south direction generally. Okay, but vertical is taken care more seriously. Now the question is, what determines the global mean temperature of the planet at surface and in the free atmosphere? How do tropospheric temperature structure and absorber amounts influence middle atmosphere assumed in the radiative equilibrium? These are some of the questions or challenges which are encountered in a RCM applied for global mean climatology. Okay, this is an example of radiative convective equilibria versus the radiative heating. And what you see in this diagram is basically the profile of temperature. Okay, this is y-axis is your temperature, that is vertical, and this is the horizontal x-axis temperature. Okay, and this is the vertical variation of the temperature. And what you see in this diagram, these other lines are basically, I was telling you earlier today about the super adiabatic lapse rate. You remember I was telling about the super adiabatic lapse rate. Okay, when the earth is heated excessively, like in say Churu in Rajasthan or Sri Ganganagar in Rajasthan, then immediately the lapse rate can become super adiabatic and vigorous convection develops. Very strong, intense convection start developing, which restores the unnatural lapse rate to the natural value. Okay. So these are the simple convective adjustment scheme. This is also called the simple convective adjustment scheme proposed by Manabe and Stricker, 1964. Okay. As I said, as soon as the super adiabatic lapse rate develops, the convection starts and it adjusts the temperature in the vertical. So this is called the adjustment process to prevent the lapse rate exceeding a critical value. Okay, there is no explicit consideration of humidity except radiatively because this is a dry convective adjustment. Similarly, there is also a moist convective adjustment. Okay, dry convective adjustment and the moist convective adjustment. So such kind of adjustment warms the troposphere and cools the surface. Okay, and more details are given in this paper by Manabe and Strickler 1964 in the Journal of Atmospheric Sciences. Okay, then this is another example of a two-dimensional RCM result. the radiative convective equilibrium temperature as a function of latitude, because we have got now variation in the latitude. This is 0 degree, 5 degree, and so on up to 45 degree, just the mid latitude. And this is the vertical, 1000 millibar, 900, and so on up to 100 millibar. Okay, the variation of the temperature two-dimensionally in north-south and vertical. These are the temperature isolines. Okay, isolines of temperature, or what do you call the isolines of temperature? What is the name? There is a name for the isolines of temperature. Tell me.
Isotherms.
Isotherms.
Yes, exactly. Isotherms. Right. So these are the isotherms. So albedo is tuned to give realistic sounding at the equator in such models. Note x-axis only goes up to 45 degree, already well below the freezing at surface. Circulation needed to warm up Canada. Just a kind of joke or a statement. Okay. Because if you go further north, and again your surface temperature will be colder. Okay. So that means you are just considering only up to Canada, not going further north towards the pole. Okay. So what is this second application of RCM? The second application is testing physical parameterizations. Okay. Generally, if you have heard about the test beds, have you heard about the test beds? There are, now, as I said earlier, there are field experiments through which we try to have intensive observations done of the column of the atmosphere over a given region. Like I mentioned earlier, Monex or Storm or Gate, Armex, Bobmex, etc. Okay. And so, for atmospheric purpose, many test beds have been selected. Many test beds, like there is a so-called arm cart test bed. Okay, because when we try to investigate or understand a particular physical process, then we have to use these field observations over a given area, which is called the test bed, where we have got a lot of sophisticated instrumentations, and we try to measure many physical parameters to test our hypothesis or to test a new model. One such is the so-called ARM card. ARM card stands for, ARM card. Have you heard about the ARM card? Yes or no?
No, sir.
Atmospheric. Okay. A stands for atmospheric. R stands for radiation. And M stands for measurement. Atmospheric radiation measurement. This is a long field campaign, especially started by USA. Long field campaign for many years. I think still they have a ARM card test bed to investigate the radiative processes of the atmosphere. ARM card. Right? So they collect a lot of observations, intensive observations over different locations of the Earth or the globe. So there are many ARM card test bed locations. Many of them are in USA, some of them are in Ocean Pacific, some of them are in other countries also. Okay, as part of a global ARM card network test bed. And similarly, this CART stands for C, stands for cloud. A stands for and. R stands for cloud and radiation. and T stands for test bed. So ARM card stands for atmospheric radiation measurement, cloud, atmosphere radiation interaction. No, I think it's not atmosphere. It's not and, it's aerosol. Cloud aerosol radiation interaction test bed. Okay. And this is one example. There are many test beds also. Even in India also, we have recently got a monsoon test bed to investigate the monsoon processes. We have got land surface processes test bed in the western part of the country. And we have proposed many test beds like a storm test bed in West Bengal region, the northeastern region, storm test bed. We propose also for the cloud burst test bed in the Himalayas, mountains, etc. etc. Okay, so the second application of the RCM are testing physical parameterizations in test beds for DCMs. See how the parameterizations functions without added complexity of interactions with the dynamics. Okay. The large-scale advection terms specified is from observation through, though this is not trivial to do, as it requires accurate divergence and vertical velocity. In most places, routine observations are not enough, so field experiments are required. Okay. Now compare T and Q with observation. Comparing precipitation or convective heating is not generally meaningful. Okay. So we try to test the physical parameterizations. This is another example of Aztecs. Aztecs. Have you heard about the Aztecs? Yes or no?
No, sir.
Aztecs. No. Well, Aztecs is acronym for Atlantic Stratocumulus, Atlantic Stratocumulus Transition Experiment. Atlantic Stratocumulus Transition Experiment. Like our large part of the tropical Atlantic Ocean, you will find a lot of stratocumulus clouds, and they transition or transform into the deep clouds, leading to a lot of interaction between different physical processes. So an experiment was conducted, a field experiment was conducted, just like the GATE, the Aztecs was conducted to study the transition of the stratocumulus cloud into other forms. It was a Lagrangian field experiment conducted in 1992, especially for the study of the boundary layer dynamics, because these stratocumulus clouds are generally generally the lower clouds present in the boundary layer. Bases are in the boundary layer, and this is an illustration for that. See, there's stratocumulus cloud, but it slowly transition or transform into deep towering cumulus cloud, convective clouds. And a lot of observations were taken by ships. This is one ship, this is another ship, okay, over the ocean. Now, lots of balloons were launched to measure the atmospheric profiles and many other types of experiment. Right? The details of this is described in this paper by Brethron. Chris Brethron is another professor of meteorology or atmospheric science in Canada, I think British Columbia, University of British Columbia. Chris Brethron. He published this paper in Boundary Layer Meteorology way back in 1993. Okay. So in such kind of study, we use another model called LES. Okay, large eddy scale model. LES is the large eddy scale model rather than the single column model. Because LES is much more high resolution. Because in such kind of transition of the clouds, eddies play a lot of important role, and so we have to use high resolution eddy scale model, large eddy scale model, rather than the SCM, which is coarser. So the question is, what controls the low cloudiness? These were some of the objectives of the Aztecs. entrainment physics, cloud microphysics, surface flux feedbacks, okay, and simulations of the atmospheric boundary layer. Pre-troposphere essentially completely given. Single column follows low level flow. Okay, these are some of the objectives of the asterisks, and for this they use the LES rather than SCM. Okay. And these are some of the examples of the vertical profiles of temperature. Okay, the specific humidity. Okay, the relative humidity, as you can see that the highest relative humidity or highest moisture content is in the lower part of the atmosphere. As you go up, the atmosphere becomes very dry. Sometimes if there is a cloud present, then there can be humidity also at the higher level, but otherwise generally it is dry as you go up. Moist static energy, you know what is moist static energy? I think we had talked about this in one of the previous classes, I think last semester, atmospheric physics. You know what is moist static energy? MSc? Yes or no? Do you remember what is MSc? Like the dry static energy, just now we talked about the dry static energy. S is a dry static, denoted by S, dry static energy is equal to CPT plus GZ, right? We just talked today in the class. Similarly, there is moist static energy. We have talked about this in the last semester, atmospheric physics. Moist static energy. This is something similar to S, but one moisture term is also added. CPT plus GZ plus LQ, where L is the latent heat of condensation and Q is the specific humidity. So this MSE is a very important parameter to study the convection. Okay, through the vertical profiles of the MSE, you can have several diagnostics. Am I audible to you, all of you?
Yes,
Am I
sir.
audible to all of you? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So this is typical profile of the moist static energy. Okay, vertical profile of the moist static energy. So in summary, an RCM is a one-dimensional model representing vertical energy transfer due to the advective, radiative, and convective processes. The advective terms must be imposed or ignored in some recent approaches or parameterized. Okay. The advective terms can be zero. That means we do not allow anything to come to your column of the atmosphere, which is in radiative convective equilibrium, which is adequate to understand some gross aspects of the global mean climate. Okay. Advective terms imposed when representing a single column, that is for testing parameterizations. Right? In the latter case, precipitation heating is not a meaningful output, at least over the tropical ocean. Okay. There are some new approaches to parameterizing. Remove this to some other place. Approaches to parameterizing large-scale dynamics for tropical applications. Okay. So this is the summary of the RCM. Okay. So I think this completes our topic for today. Yeah, this completes our topic for today. That's it. So with this, we have completed 3 models today. Right? We have completed 3 models today. I see the 8 people. I think some of you have got lost because of the connection problem. Maybe yeah, Krishna is back now. Okay, so we had 3 classes rather today. 2 classes in the morning and 1 classes in the, or 1.5 hour classes in the morning and 1 hour class now in the afternoon. And in these last 3 hours, we have completed 3 types of simple models. They are called the simple model. Okay, one is the EBM, energy balance model. The other is the SCM, the single column model, and third is the RCM, the radiative convective model. Okay. The next category of models are the so-called intermediate category, which are the filtered models. And I explained to you yesterday, all in the class, what are the filtered models. And in that category comes the barotropic model, the baroclinic model, the equivalent barotropic model, the quasi-geostropic model, etc. So those models will be taught to you by another teacher, hopefully. Okay. So with this, I complete my part of the syllabus, and as I said already that this is my last class for you for this subject. Okay, unfortunately, I could not see you in the campus. We only saw each other online now in the first semester as well as in this semester due to the COVID problem, right? So we only know each other through the internet. Now you can all switch on your video, right? You can all switch on your video. All of you switch on your video. Yep. Trishna and Alvin and Deepak, I can see Anjali, fine, Prasad, Barsa, and Sam, your video is off. And Sri Lakshmi, also your video is off. Vishal, can switch on your video. If your internet is good, then keep your video on. Prasad, okay.
It's off, sir. Sometimes it gets
Some of you, yeah, some of your video may be, I mean, internet may be fluctuating. What about Syam Sundar? Are you there or you have just gone somewhere? Syam Sundar?
Yes, sir.
Oh, he's there, okay. So, yeah, Sri Lakshmi again switched off her video. So, well, I just said that, Sri Lakshmi, keep on your video on, keep your video on, okay. So I just said that last year also, actually we started this online classes last year, as you know, when the lockdown started, I think at the end of the March. Then for about 1 week or so, we were not sure that what to do, and then after that we started the online classes last year. I think from first week of the April onwards, and therefore whatever is there in the syllabus, I think till this filtered model, I taught it in the class physically on the board, blackboard. Okay, and after that, the remaining part of the syllabus I had taken online, and therefore there is a video recording of all the online classes of last year, starting from the numerical discretization, numerical time integration, and all other parts of the syllabus. They are all recorded also from my last year's classes in the video. And last year, because we didn't have much experience about these online classes, so those videos are scattered here and there. Okay. But later on, when we got more and more experience, then we started putting those videos, at least I started putting those videos on systematically on the YouTube. And most of my videos of the third semester NWP course and your second semester of the atmospheric physics, they are all systematically archived in the YouTube. You already know that. You can search now with the topic and my name, and you can find easily the YouTube video of the atmospheric physics or NWP. The entire NWP syllabus is there in the YouTube. And for this course, now till this part again, I could make the videos recording till today. And rest of the part from the numerical integration is there, but here and there. So I will try to put them together again and store that in the YouTube, and maybe I'll let you know, or you can later on search yourself also. So that, except for the filtered model, which may take, I mean, depends on the madam how many lectures you will take to complete that, but generally each of those models takes at least one class or two class. Like barotropic model, generally in one class it will be over. Equivalent barotropic model, another class. Then baroclinic model, another class, 3 class. Then 2-layer model, another class, the 4th class. Then I think you already know about the vorticity equation, otherwise it will take one class. Omega equation will take another class. So about 6 to 7 lectures will take for the filtered models, including the vorticity equation and omega equation. So that part, of course, madam will take, hopefully. And after that, again, remaining part is available for my last year's video if you want to. Otherwise, madam will take anyway that part also. Right? So this is what I have to say to you, and study well. Okay, and if anytime you need my help or support, you're always welcome. You have my email address. I am sure you also have my telephone number, right? So you can call me anytime, even if I'm not in the university, wherever I am. You can get in touch with me through email, okay, through the telephone. We can also arrange video meetings. I mean, even if I'm not in the university, you can arrange the video meetings for any discussion, clarification, right? I'm only going from the university.
Yes,
I'm not going from the board, right? So according to our convenient time, we can find a convenient time, and we can always be in touch, discuss or clarify anything if you have in future. Okay. So wish you all the best. Keep in touch, and I don't know why your scores have not been shown to you. Your scores are ready with me, but since others have not shown, I will talk to the other teachers why they have not shown, and if allowed or if permitted, then I can tell you your scores maybe later on some day. Okay. And I see that some of you have done very well in the atmospheric physics, especially the last semester, end of semester examination. I think one of the scores I have shared with you also, one of the internal tests, I think CIA 1 or CIA 2 probably I shared with you, right? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
CIA 1.
Yeah, exactly.
CIA
Shared with the CIA 1. But after that, but I heard that no other teacher has shared the scores with you. Is that so?
No, sir.
Yeah, so that is the point. So therefore, I'll ask them why they have not shown you the scores, and if possible, I'll try to show you the scores of your second internal assessment of the last semester and also the end of semester examination. Some of you have done really very good, but some of you have to work hard. Okay, and also I've seen that some of you have improved a lot from the first test to the second test to the final examination. Some of you who did not do well in the first internal test, they improved in the second internal, and they improved further in the final examination, right? So you have to do systematic work. I know, I mean, initially everything is new, so it takes time to adjust, right? But later on, of course, once you have got the experience of online learning, online classes, then, and you have also the books, etc., everything, so you can study and improve yourself. But I can tell you one thing, that all of you have passed. At least all of you have passed in my subject, in the atmospheric physics. I think pass mark is only 40, and most of you are above 50. Okay, I can only tell you the range of the scores. I will not be able to tell you the score of individual person, but I can tell you the range. And the range of the final semester results of the atmospheric physics is approximately from 50 till 90 plus. Okay, the best student has scored more than 90 in the atmospheric physics, and the weakest the student has got about 50. Okay, so it's a big range, and those who are in the lower range, this should improve. Once you come to know about your score, then you should really improve, okay, your work, study well, okay. Because I expect that, you see, I'm very generous in giving marks. If somebody writes correctly, I give him full marks, like 20 by 20. Also, I've given to some of the students of your senior batches. But if you don't write, then I have no scope to give you marks. Right? So never try to leave any question. Always try to attempt, because there is no negative marking. Right? If there is negative marking, then there is a danger of losing marks. And if there is no negative marking, then try to attempt all the questions. And then also you have to manage. See, each question carry how much marks. And accordingly, you have to write the answer in a short way or in a long way. Suppose if a question carries only 3 marks and you have answered that in 3 pages, that is a wastage. Because after writing all those things in 3 pages, you get only 3 marks. Right? But if it is carrying 10 marks, for example, certainly you can describe in 4 pages, 5 pages. Right? Spend more time. So according to the question, weightage of the question, you have to accordingly write. And I saw that some of you had written too much for a small question and too little for a large question. And that's how we lost the marks. Okay, so just see the weightage of the score of each question and write accordingly. I see that some of you are quite interactive in the class. Some of you are very silent in the class. Being interactive is good, because that's how teacher will also assess you interactively. Right? But then you have also to write in the answer sheet, because that is what eventually give you the score. Right? Through the interaction in the class, we come to know that, okay, this student is following or very keenly interested in the subject. You are interacting in the classes. That's good. But at the end also you have to write correct answers in the answer sheets in the final examination. And I found that some of you are quite good in the class interaction, but could not do well in the written test. And that is, I think, because of this unbalanced answer. Answered a short question in a long way and a long question in a short way. Right? So these are the things which you have to improve. Here the trend is that at the end of each examination, whether it's internal or final, the answer sheets are shown to all the students, so that they can see where they have done mistake and improve in the next time. Okay, and they have to also sign in each answer sheet that I have seen my answer sheet. I am satisfied with the marks which is given to me. So for that you have to sign the answer sheets. So tomorrow no one can complain that I was given less mark although I wrote correctly, or I was given no marks, etc. There is no complaint, because the answer sheet is shown to all the students. But that is only when there is a offline class, when you are physically present in the university. In the online classes, those things are not possible. Also, there are many other things like in the offline class, when we are physically present in the classroom writing examination, then we are sure that nobody is copying from any other source, either from the internet or from your notebooks. And so whatever you have written, that is your genuine knowledge. But in the online examination, we are not sure whether you have copied or from your notebook or from your internet, etc. So those problems are there in the online examination. Right? So anyway, the good part is that in spite of this lockdown due to the COVID, we conducted all the classes. If you remember, in the last semester in the atmospheric physics, I took more than 60 classes, I think. 60 lectures, 65 lectures, right? And we conducted the examination. Many universities are lagging behind. The entire session is lagging behind by 6 months or more than that. And that hampers their students' career in the long run, right? So we try to ensure that as much as possible, we take the classes so that you don't lose your time. Your academic session goes on time, although it is practically very, very difficult. We are also late by a few months, but not like other universities where they are late by several months. Right? So with this, now I would like to listen from you. If you have anything to say, your feedback or any question, etc., like to ask from you. Starting with Sam Sundar, do you have to say anything?
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay. Krishna?
So we will miss you, sir.
Well, I will miss you too. That's what I said, that I could not even see you.
So the way you teach, sir, it's different, sir.
Oh, yeah, is it?
And before the starting of the class, every day you interacted with every student, sir. That is quite different, sir, from other teachers, sir.
I see. Well, everybody has their own style, right?
And on fine day, we should meet each other, sir, actually.
Hopefully, because I will not be in the campus. When I leave this place, I will not be in the campus. But maybe I will be coming, sometimes, if possible. But I am not sure whether you will be there when I come here for a day or so. Whether at that time you will be here in the campus, this I don't know. Right? So anyway, the point is, you might have seen my background. Have you seen my background?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you might have seen my profile in the university's website or anywhere. Just search in the internet. And I'm not a professional teacher, by the way, as you might have seen from my biodata or from my profile. I'm not a professional teacher. I'm basically a scientist. Right? All through my career, I worked at the Ministry of Earth Sciences, National Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasting, and the India Meteorological Department. Right? So after I superannuated from there, then I was called here to start this department, the new department which was set up in 2016. So I completed 4 years term after my retirement. And so while I was working as a scientist, I always wanted to share my knowledge, whatever I learned throughout my career as a scientist, with the students, younger students now. And so I could do that successfully, hopefully in the last 4 years, right? I could
Yes,
share
sir.
I could share my knowledge, whatever I gained during my research career as a scientist. And so it is also a pleasure to me. Rather, it is also a learning to me, because when you are doing research as a scientist, then many things you start forgetting, because things I learned, say, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, it's not easy to remember everything. Like this, if you have seen my profile, I did my PhD from IIT Delhi, okay, way back in 1987. I'll just count how many years ago. 21 plus 13, कितना हो गया? What, almost 34 years? 34 years ago, right? So I did my PhD 34 years ago. Just imagine when I did my MSc, even before that. Right? So obviously I can't remember all the fundamentals for 30 years, right? But teaching you gave me opportunity to just refresh back my old stuff which I learned, studied 30 years ago. Right? So it was a good learning for me also, just refresh all things, right? Because when we are a scientist, we just do the latest kind of things. Whatever is the latest technique, whether in mathematics or physics, atmospheric physics, clouds, convection, radiation, etc. Because that is what is the task given challenge. But when you are teaching, then you have to go back to the fundamentals, right? And to go back to the fundamentals, you have to read. And to teach you for 1 hour, I have to read for 2-3 hours, right? So that is an advantage to me, a learning experience to me as well, right? But the most challenging part I felt was the practical part, especially when I was teaching NWP last semester. Then that is the most challenging part, because we are not sitting physically in the lab, in a computer lab, right? and very difficult to teach how to run the experiment, how to run the model, because many of the students are totally unfamiliar with the Linux environment, Linux system. Everything has to be done on the Linux, right? And the coding, Fortran, scripting language, etc., right? So when I have to teach online these kind of things, many people don't even know, they don't even have the Linux loaded in their laptop. For them also it is the first time. And so a lot of difficulties come, a lot of errors come, which is so easily solved when we are physically present in the lab. So these are the biggest challenges of the online classes. But nevertheless, you have to do that somehow by taking the help of your seniors, by taking the help of the books or whatever, right? And we could succeed. I could see that because many of your seniors, when I was teaching them the NWP, it had a practical component, and many of them they said that, I mean, this practical component was very difficult, but they learned a lot. In that practical component, they learned a lot because that's where we talk about the divergence, we talk about the convergence theoretically. How to compute that? Suppose if you have to compute how much is the divergence, how much is the convergence, how much is the vorticity, how much is the vertical velocity, those things have to be computed. So you can compute that only when you know about the Linux, you know about the programming, you know about the scripting languages. And they were very happy. That thing is that nowadays so many things are available ready-made, but ready-made things do not make you learn properly, right? It only gives you a training of the tool, how to use the tool. For example, there are many programs already available to compute the vorticity. Just give the input and output will come. And if somebody is good in software, then he doesn't have to study atmospheric science for 2 years. He'll say, okay, I can run any model you give it to me, because they're all softwares basically, and get the answer, get the result. But that is like running a black box, right? It's like running a black box. You know nothing about what is inside, what is the science behind that, but only you get the answer, final answer. And similarly, the plotting of the graphs, plotting of the results, same thing, right? I remember in our days how we used to learn computer programming. There was not even a computer. There was no PC. When I was doing my PhD, PCs were not there like today, right? And there was no hard disk. Hard disk was like 80 KB, big floppy hard disk. Nowadays we are talking about 32 GB carrying in our pocket in a pen drive, right? So those were the days, but in those days also we learned. And today you have got much better computing facility, computing power. So lots of things to learn. There was no internet nowadays. Internet started in India only around 1995 or so, 96 or so. Internet started in India at that time, long after I completed my PhD. And you see nowadays, because of the internet, everything is on the just fingertips, right? Just Google Baba, right? Search on the Google Baba any question and you will get the answer, right? So in our days, there was no Google Baba. The only way is that go to the library, find the books, and there used to be Encyclopedia Britannica, and many types of encyclopedia. So go to the library, turn the pages, and then find the answer. That was the only way in our time. But nowadays, just sitting at home on your, you don't even have to have a laptop, just on your mobile phone, search Google, and Google will give you all the answer, right? So this is the difference between our days and your days, right? So with all these latest modern tools and techniques, you can learn much better, much faster than what we used to have. Computer was so small in those days when we were doing PhD, so small computers. I can talk for hours and hours, on all these things when we have a free time, but I see that now already 16:27. And madam said that she will take a class at 4:30. Right? So only 3 minutes left for.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
She will take a class on Monday.
What is that? I'm not able to hear you clearly.
Ma'am will take class only on Monday, sir.
Achha, ma'am will not take class today now?
No,
Is
sir.
it?
No, sir, she won't
No,
take.
sir.
She will take
She
on
won't.
Oh,
Monday.
okay. I see. If so, then I can go on, right? But
Yes,
let me
sir.
stop recording. These things need not be
Yes, sir.
recorded.
Yes.
Okay, I have to stop recording. All these things are recorded